Hi, it's Jane from the Compassion Project, and I am here today with Carmen Walsh, and I'm super excited to talk to her. Carmen is a woman with a huge heart and a lot of compassion. She is an artist, a designer, a photographer, and a writer. And she currently lives in York, Pennsylvania, and works as a contracts administrator at Walden University. Carmen's story really related to me, and I really believe that we can help a lot of people by hearing her story. And as a young girl, she had put too much responsibility on herself, and she lost her joy. And only recently has she found it again and her voice, and we'll talk about that. And yeah, I just think it's really important to share our stories and what we've been through. And I think a lot of us have things in our past that hold us back, and sometimes we don't even realize it. So I think a lot of people will relate, even though our stories are each very unique, right? So welcome, Carmen.
Thank you so much.
So really what I want to start so people understand your story and your family is if you want to start when you were younger, your memories of kind of before you're 10, because I know your house was very joyous, right?
Yeah. I was actually the youngest of 5 kids to my parents, and we are a very musical family. My mom was the choir director and church organist, and my dad played saxophone. All of us played at least one instrument. 3 of us sang in the choir. We went to church every Sunday. We were a very close family. My dad had a trucking business that he started actually the year I was born. So we had that going on in the house as well. But Sundays were family time, and there was always music in the house.
Aww.
And a lot of love.
So Carmen, you were the baby of...
I was the baby, yeah.
So can you tell me the order of your siblings?
Sure. My sister is the oldest, so there's a 12-year gap between my sister and I, and then there were 3 boys in the middle.
Okay. So your memories were just musical and happy and joyous. And then tell me about your siblings, like Eric. We're really going to talk about your one sibling, Eric.
Sure. Yeah, Eric was the middle. He was the middle child, and he was 6 years older than me. So actually, the midpoint, 12-year span between all of us, and he was in the 6-year point. And Eric had epilepsy. He had it from the time he was 6 months old. So he had seizures on a regular basis. My memory of it is that he had what are called absence seizures, which are these little petite mal seizures, they're called, where he would just kind of lose awareness for a few seconds, mid-sentence, just blank. And then, those happened all the time, multiple times a day. And then he had what are called grand mal seizures, which are those things you see on TV, when people, like, their whole body is jerking and they fall on the ground and all that. Those he had, in my memory, he had those at least one every 1 to 2 weeks.
A grand mal seizure.
Yeah, so there was no more than 2 weeks would go by without one of those happening.
Because just like I look at, like, when I hear you talk about epilepsy, I just, as a person that's not around someone with epilepsy, I find it kind of growing up like scary. If I knew, because I think a lot of us have been around or seen people with seizures, and I clearly remember once as a child, we were at this water park and this little boy had this full seizure at the top, and I was terrified. And I know people that know how to deal with it, but I think, so for you were the youngest, so you would have been, that would just part of your life, you would have.
Exactly. That was just part of my life.
Yeah.
And, but not to minimize that, because looking back, I didn't think about it as a child really, but looking back, I realized that I had such great anxiety because of that. Like, I was always on edge. I was always had like that ear open to, is there a noise? And every time there's a noise, I'm going to run to make sure that he didn't just fall into something that was going to hurt him. So that was a constant, my entire childhood.
So when I know when he was 10, no, you were 10. What happened when you were 10?
Yeah, when I was, and I think it's about 10, that's the best I can do with putting the memories together. But yeah, I was about 10 and I was sitting at the breakfast table with Eric and my younger brother, Ivan. So he's 4 years older than me. And we're sitting at the table, just eating our breakfast. And Eric had a seizure. He fell off the bench onto the floor and his arms and legs are jerking around like they did. And, so he'd be 16 at this point. And his eyes rolled back in his head. And it's the first time I'd ever seen that where I could only see whites. Like I couldn't see the irises anymore. It was just white. And something about that really freaked me out. And I just had this knowing that he wasn't going to make it. Like he was going to die, and it might not be that day, but he was going to die. And I feel like, yeah, it makes me want to cry talking about it. But I feel like at that point, without really being conscious of it, I decided that I was going to do absolutely everything I could to protect him. Even knowing it was a losing game, yeah.
And you think for a 10-year-old girl that's so young, you're so young at 10 and you're innocent, right? We have innocence.
Mm-hmm.
And that moment to realize that he could die would be so scary. And then for you to be like in you somewhere to take on the responsibility and say, and so then is that when you really started to be so on almost, your brain must have been alert?
Yes, I think that's when the anxiety kicked in. That's when I got so like on edge, tense all the time. My bedroom was right next to his bedroom. So like, even sleeping, I think I was probably turned, had the ear on. Yeah, you're right. It's a young age to have that. And I never said anything. And looking back, that's the other thing I realized, and having this conversation with my mom just recently, when I shared this story with her for the first time, I never said anything. I never said, this is too much. I never said, this is hard. I just didn't, I just did what I thought I needed to do. So I think a lot of us do that. We just kind of suck it up and, well, this just has to be done. And we don't reach out for help. And I've learned recently, that's one of the most important things. And one of the bravest things actually we can do is ask for help. I think I grew up with the idea that if you asked for help, that meant you were weak. And I completely have adjusted that perception where I think that means you're brave if you ask for help.
So, but your mom and dad would have been lost in their own, like as parents, trying to look after him as best they can, and the
Absolutely.
5 children.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes when we have issues from our past, like I have things too, and it's easy to kind of go back and blame or think, why didn't my mom do this, or why didn't my dad do this? But then when you look back and be like, they're just people trying to survive. Trying
Absolutely.
to get through.
Yeah.
So, and they, if you don't speak up, they wouldn't have been aware that you took on this responsibility. What was Eric like? I'm curious, like 16 years old, was he like going to normal school? Was he funny? What was he like?
Yeah. I wish I had more memories. They're coming back to me slowly, but I blocked out a lot of my life. But yes, he was funny. He did go to a regular school. He couldn't ever get a driver's license. Obviously, if you have seizures, you can't do that.
Yeah.
But he played in the band. He played the tuba. He played the sousaphone in the marching band, which is scary for anybody, I think. But when you have a seizure, possibility, and you have this big thing with the bell, and but he loved it. He absolutely loved music, and so yeah, he was big in band, and he sang in the choir, in the chorus at school. And he had this deep bass voice, and he loved to sing. He loved, like all the little things. He would drive the lawnmower around and just have a blast because that was the only thing he could drive. He would never be able to drive a car, but he loved driving the lawnmower around our yard. He loved getting together with church youth group, and he just loved people.
So did he feel like the epilepsy was holding him back? Did he like was he, you know what I mean? Like, was he like frustrated, or did he just accept it, or what? Like, because he couldn't get a driver's license, he's young, like it'd be scary at school. What if something happened at school? Or did he just live his life?
Well, that's a good question. For a long time, I thought he just lived his life, and he seemed okay with it and didn't seem to struggle. I didn't see the struggle. Years and years and years later, we found a letter that he had written to God where he asked him to take the epilepsy away.
Oh.
So,
yeah, it's so hard. So what, I know from then 10 to for 5 years, it was really hard, right? And then when you were 16, what happened? I know.
Yes. So I was 15 and a half, and my parents came. It was actually finals. I was in my sophomore year in high school, and my parents came and got me in mid-morning, and I was sitting actually in a kind of a study hall thing in the course room, and they came and I saw them walk in, and I was like, what's this about? And my brother had died that morning.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, it was surreal to say the least. I remember walking through the high school, going to my locker to get my things, and somebody passed me, I don't remember who, and they're like, hey, how are you? I'm like, my brother died. I mean, it was just a shock,
So Eric was 21.
He was 21, yes.
And he died of a seizure, right?
Yeah. I mean, epilepsy doesn't kill you, but you can, accidents happen because of it. So he basically suffocated just because of the way he fell. Yeah.
Aww. So it must have been so hard. So they took you from school, and what, you went home, or what? You must have been in shock.
Yeah, I went home. I was definitely in shock. He had died early in the morning, and my mom had waited to come get me because she knew I was taking finals. So she wanted to allow me to get my first final in, and then I would have one in the afternoon, but they came and got me midday. So the rest of my siblings were actually already at the house and had been there for hours.
Oh.
So when I walked in, it was very surreal because they were all in the kitchen and eating pizza and laughing. And I didn't know how to deal with that at all. I felt like I had just walked on another planet, and I'm trying to process that my brother was dead and they were laughing, and I went to my room and I shut the door.
You know what? That really gets to my heart. I have a memory when I was 11 and my grandma died. The first person that died that I was close to. And I was angry at the way that they were all celebrating. I didn't understand. They were laughing and joyous. And I literally ran out of the house and hid behind this car crying. How can you? I didn't understand.
Yeah.
So for your young brain, 16 years old, you think you're going to come home and everyone's going to be crying and devastated. And you're like, how can you be?
Yeah. And honestly, I to be perfectly frank, I didn't understand that day until my dad died, which is actually 14 months ago today. That day, I finally understood what was happening the day my brother died, because I was there for the whole process this time. We were all there together when my dad died. And so I saw how quickly it goes from tears to just kind of normalizing, and laughing about and getting lunch. And, like it happens very quickly. I mean, obviously all the grief then happens later too, but that initial response is very quick. It was like I got to that end of that day and I went, oh my gosh, like I get now what happened the day Eric died. Like they had the time, those couple hours, whatever it was, to sit there, to cry, to go through all the shock and everything. And I was just a couple hours behind, I mean, that's all the difference it took. But, it felt like different planets at the time. But yeah. It was good that was one good thing that came out of my dad's passing, was that I finally understood that.
Well, I'm so sorry your dad passed away. Did he pass away at home where you were all there, you said?
Well, we were all there. My parents had actually just moved to like a senior living facility, and he had been in the hospital and had gone back to the rehab, which was at their facility. So that is actually where he passed away, was in the rehab. I had gone there the day before, actually, which was a blessing that I can't even tell you how grateful I am for, because he came to that day. He was himself for a little while that day. And then, the next morning we got the call that he wasn't going to be much longer. And so we were all able to get there and say goodbye and be there together, which, I'm so super grateful for.
Wow, just to have those moments, like those memories, you don't realize. But it's interesting that you could look at the death of your brother different. And it's funny because I don't know, as parents, we try to do the right thing, moms. And it's like, oh, let you write your exam and we'll get you later. But if she just gone and got you and you had grieved with everyone, it would have been easier for you. But yeah. As parents, we're just trying to do
Absolutely
the right thing,
Yeah. My mom's apologized for that a number of times. I'm like, it's okay, Mom, I get it,
Wow. So I can see how you would lose your joy from that young age and the responsibility, and then your brain is now programmed to be aware and on alert all the time for his seizures. And then he passes away and you go through that grieving. So when did you realize that you had actually lost joy, or that you sometimes it takes awareness to be like, you know what I mean? Because we just go in life and we do our thing, and then all of a sudden you're like, when did the awareness come to you that like, I have lost joy, I'm not singing? Or because you actually have a good singing voice.
Yeah, I didn't. I did a lot of music as a kid, and even through high school. I sang in the chorus, but I mainly played clarinet in band. I was really good in like all state band and all that with clarinet, and I played piano at home. And that actually, playing piano and singing at home was joy for me. Just a way just to sit and escape. And I love songs, and just sitting there and playing and singing, I loved it. I think I lost some of that when my focus turned so much to my brother, at 10. And while I continued playing in school and stuff, I didn't really do the sitting down at home and just really enjoying music anymore.
Like the freedom.
Yeah. And I remember actually when my brother died, my first reaction when I went, I'm in the surrealist, area, and I went to my room and I shut the door, and I remember lying down on my bed and being relieved.
Okay.
And then I felt guilty. Because I remember thinking, oh, good, I don't have to worry about Eric anymore. And then I felt guilty.
I admire you for admitting that, because that's something that we're human, and you had this huge responsibility, and it would feel like relief, but then you love him and you miss him. So you're in this totally contradicting the feeling, right?
Yeah. as far as my awareness, I don't think it came for a really long time. I proceeded to get my first boyfriend within 2 months after my brother dying. I met a guy and I ended up marrying him. And just to sum up in a nutshell, what was really wrong with that relationship was what he told me it was. Well, I didn't believe him at the time, but I didn't know who I was. And he was right. Because I spent my life focused on other people. You know, when it was my brother, it was my brother, you know, but when he was gone, I had that habit that was ingrained in me that I was looking at other people, like, how do I make other people happy? You know, what do they expect of me? And doing all those things. And if I do that, then they'll love me.
Right. It
And,
makes sense.
it doesn't work like that. Right. So I didn't know who I was for a really long time.
Wow. And you probably didn't really love yourself. You know, I think it's a lot for us to the self-love and actually on Friday I'm doing this Friday Focus on Love. It's what I do for Peace 360. And I've really been researching love this last week. And the interesting thing, if you think about a relationship, because you're talking about your husband, because you're not with him now, right? That was
No. Oh, that ended like when I was in my early 20s. We didn't. The marriage didn't last very long.
Okay. Because they say in this, it's so interesting. This book. This is a Leo Buscaglia.
Oh, yeah.
Love, but he says that if you don't love yourself and then you get into a relationship, you want that person to fulfill something for you, and so you're looking at him to give you all these things or whatever you need. But if you're not full, it's almost impossible to have a real relationship. And I thought, for you, if you lost Eric, then you'd be like looking for, like to replace that habit brain where you need to take care of someone, or right? Is that
absolutely? Right? And I did it for decades.
Oh, really?
So I did not have any successful relationships until this year.
Wow.
This past year. Mm-hmm.
I find that really interesting because we are habit forming. Our brains, it's just the way we are, and then you have to be able to change it and put healthy habits in there.
Yeah.
So how did like forgiveness and awareness are a big part of your healing, right? Is it?
Yeah, and you froze just there for a second, so maybe you could repeat what you just said.
Oh, I froze. In your healing and being able to let go, was it forgiveness a big part of it, do you say?
Yeah, definitely, and mainly forgiving myself, honestly. I had a lot of guilt for what I thought was not being a good sister, because in his last, I guess, 2-3 years, probably, I got so frustrated with Eric. You know, I just, and obviously looking back now, it's easy to see that it was just because I was so tense about the whole thing, and I was trying to control it, and it was out of my control. But, so, I would get mad at him for just the smallest of things. Like I would get mad because I could hear him breathing, which my mom explained later on. And, like all the medicine he was on, made him stuffy, and, but I didn't know. And I didn't ask, and I was a kid.
A young girl. You're like 15, 14, 15. 16. I mean, that age in itself would be hard to survive that age, and then to have you need to forgive yourself. We all need to forgive ourselves for things that we couldn't control and that we weren't aware. I mean, we're just trying to survive ourselves, right?
Yeah. And then, beyond that, then forgiving myself for the bad decisions I made based on the habits, that I had created for myself in a way that I thought was going to protect me, protect him. They were just bad habits. And those ended up in bad decisions. But they got me here. So I no longer regret anything. And I think that's important, actually, is that we appreciate all of our experiences. They get us to where we are and they make us who we are.
Yeah.
And I think they help us actually. Be compassionate toward others. It's a lot easier. I mean, it's great to be compassionate for everyone regardless. It's easier when you can identify with some of their experiences. And, because of some of the choices I made and some experiences that I've had, I find it easier to be compassionate with people and less judgmental, because I'm like, yeah, well, I've done some things too.
Yeah.
So, I'm grateful for everything now.
When did you start singing again? A moment where you're like, you found your joy or realized life is too short, or how did that moment come where you were able to just kind of be like, no, I need to live free and be true to myself? You had a moment, I think, didn't you?
I did. I had started playing. I felt like I wanted to sing again. I had struggled with it. And just even in the car, singing along with the radio, I'd get really choked off and it would hurt. And I got so frustrated. And so I started singing lessons, and I did that for a little while, and just wasn't working. And but I realized it was still a mental thing. And I had to make that decision that I was really going to enjoy my life. And there was a moment I was standing, in my kitchen just washing dishes, and I had the radio on. I'm kind of half humming along, and I was just like, it's this mundane thing, right? Like washing dishes. And I thought, my gosh, if I don't intentionally enjoy life, then what's the point, right? Why bother? It's not worth it. If you don't enjoy it, it's not worth it. And I started to sing, just like out loud, not just this like half-hearted thing. And it just, it didn't matter anymore how it sounded, because I felt more alive. And that's what it's about, right? We all want to feel alive. And I just started singing all kinds of things. And there was actually this one song that ended up being really important to me, and I'd forgotten about it. It's a song by Kenny Rogers, and I'd always adored Kenny Rogers. Come to find out, he looks exactly like my dad when they were young. It's crazy, but I'll share those pictures with you sometime. But there was this song called "She Believes in Me" that he did, and it's about a musician and the woman who loves him, and she's just waiting for him, kind of patiently as he's out there doing his music. And there's this line in it, and it goes, "I told her someday if she was my girl, I could change the world with my little song."
Aww.
And I had always identified with a woman in that song my whole life. And I started sharing videos of me singing and playing, on Facebook. I just share this, and it wasn't anything fancy. It's like me in my basement, but I have people reach out to me sometimes and say they were inspired by me sharing these videos. And it finally dawned on me, I'm not the woman waiting for the guy to do the thing, I'm the musician. I am singing and I am sharing songs, and it is making a difference.
Wow. That's so beautiful. And it's like you're becoming who you are, like truly, without judgment or worrying about anything. When you get to that moment in your life where you just feel free to be like, this is me. If you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't, and put it out there. And it's healing, right? You've gone through a lot in your life. And
it's so honestly, healing.
Yeah. I admire you for sharing your story. I think it's a beautiful story, and I think it's a beautiful tribute to Eric, who you loved. And I mean, he's your brother, and he had his story. And I mean, it's sad that it ended young, but I think we all have our stories, and now you can, free to live your truth.
Absolutely. Yes. I feel
Wow.
so much better.
And so anyone that has gone through something in their past, I think, so, I mean, the key would be to try to go back to whatever it is, I guess, in your past that's holding you back, and forgive yourself for what you didn't know, I guess. Is that, what advice would you give?
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think it's important to look back at our past, not to get stuck in it, but to try to look at it from kind of a third party, observer point of view, and just try to not get involved in the emotion of it, and just look at, well, what happened, and look at all the pieces, look at all the people and what was going on. And I think that way it gets a little easier to see, oh, well, this is why this happened. This is why I did what I did, or this is why they did what they did, or, and just it helps get greater awareness, to put things in perspective. And then you realize, that is the past, and nothing about your past has to determine your future. Nothing. You can wake up and do something completely different today than you did yesterday. Really, nobody forces you to do anything, right? You don't have to get out of bed. You don't have to go to your job. You don't have to, you don't have to do the same job. Nothing. It's all a choice.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a very powerful thing for people to remember, because it's so easy to get caught up in that day to day, and this is what I have to do, and this, and I forget where I first heard it, but that idea of, instead of, well, this is what I have to do, like, this is what I get to do.
Yeah, this is what I get to do.
This
Yeah,
is what
I've
I
heard
get
that
to do.
too. Change
And
the words.
absolutely. And then you're like, oh, well, that's awesome. Or if it's not what you want to do, guess what? You get to do something different, make a different choice. Yeah.
Yeah. Our whole life is made up of choices. And I think when we are aware that, wow, even like when I look back at, as a teenager, and some of the struggles I had, and it's easy to go back and blame things. And it's like, no, I made choices. And we go through stuff, and maybe you're not aware, but I think it's also important to go back, not like you say, don't stay in the past. You won't get stuck there, but to go back to kind of heal something. And sometimes it's good to hear the other side of the story, because you're holding on to a moment in your past, which for you might be tragic, that has just held you back. But then you go back and the other person says, oh, well, I was suffering too in this way. And you're like, oh, I didn't know that time was hard for you. And now I can understand why that happened. So it's like clarity, and then you can heal, I think.
Absolutely.
Super powerful. So I guess we should probably finish. But I could probably talk to you a lot longer. You're amazing.
Oh, thank you.
Think your story is so beautiful, and I am so happy that you're singing again. So something that's really important to me is gratitude. I think it is for you too. So right now, what would you say you're most grateful for? You say
most grateful. What's that?
The pandemic. Some people.
Hey, the pandemic's been good to me. So I am grateful, most grateful for all the love in my life right now. It's amazing. I spent most of my life, and I know this is wrong, that it wasn't true, but I spent most of my life feeling very alone. And this past year, I have gotten to realize, and I've also increased the amount of love in my life tremendously. And for that, I am super grateful.
Oh, I love that. And it's like you're becoming yourself, you're loving yourself, so now the love is coming back to you.
That is exactly what happened. Oh. So I am a poster child for, you have to love yourself first, and then the love will come from other people.
That is a perfect lesson. All right, well, we'll end it there. Thank you so much, Carmen. You're amazing.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Bye.
Bye.